I look at it as a living legacy that the Schedels left for us. Joe Schedel, as an engineer, was a planner, a detail guy, a critical path thinker. And since they didn't have children, he planned for this long, long ago.
Walking around and seeing some of these more mature trees and landscaping, it was certainly an appreciation for the vision and the dedication that the Schedels had. In everything that we did, we tried to respect what we thought was their vision and what they wanted this place to be.
Nothing extraordinary ever happened without a vision. What you see all around you at the Schedel Arboretum and Gardens is a testament to that. All of this began with Joe and Marie Schedel, who moved to a swampy floodplain back in 1931, and for the next 50 years worked to make an estate they could be proud of and a public garden you'll never forget. Their influence is everywhere. As an engineer, Joe had so many interests, leading him to the Panama Canal and to mining concerns in Cuba. But it was through his international reputation as a breeder of exotic waterfowl that he met Henry Ford, who also happened to be an enthusiast. That led to a hugely successful relationship between Joe's Dolomite plant in Gibsonburg and the Ford Motor Company. So successful that Joe and Marie became world travelers. But as you look at the gardens today, it's easy to see how those travels inform their understanding of the world and how that understanding is on display.
When they first came here, this, where we're sitting right now, was nothing more than a floodplain. There was nothing here. And as they traveled to 120 plus countries during their time together, they collected not only antiques and jewelry and jade and those sorts of things, but they also collected plants, and a lot of those plants you still see here.
The Schedels' love for Asian art and plant life led to the Japanese garden, with its more than 20 varieties of Japanese maple trees. Notice the dawn redwood trees. They were known only in the fossil record until their discovery in a remote area of China in the early 1940s. Joe worked with a Harvard botanist to develop seedlings that grew into these you can still see today. The seed for what would become the Schedel Arboretum and Gardens was there.
There were a few more trees that were not nearly the flowers. There was not the artwork. The public was discouraged to come out. There was no parking lot or anything like that.
Groundskeeper Darrell Gross was there too. His love affair with the gardens began as a 16-year-old high school student with an encounter with Joe Schedel's foreman.
I had heard that they were possibly hiring, so I jumped over the fence, which I shouldn't have done, and I was told to leave, but I didn't hear him, so I stayed. And then he shut the mower off and said, "I told you not to jump over the fence and to leave." And I said, "Okay," and I started walking out, and he says, "I'll try you for one day." And now 45 years have gone by, so I feel very fortunate.
Though it was still very much a private estate in those days, the Schedels dreamed of a day when everyone could enjoy the beauty all around them. So in 1968, they established a foundation to turn their estate into a public garden after they were gone. Joe died in 1981. And from that time to Marie's death in 1989, the once grand estate fell into disrepair. It was the end of only the first chapter of the story. After Marie died, the Joseph and Marie Schedel Foundation stepped in and assumed responsibility for the estate. And what a responsibility it was. They needed a man up to the task of getting everything back in order and ready for the public. They found him. Dr. Richard Fisher was a retired professor and former chair of the Department of Biological Sciences at Bowling Green State University. He became executive director of what at that moment became the Schedel Arboretum and Gardens.
Dr. Fisher had a big task ahead of him with that because of the state that things were in. But he also created, envisioned himself a lot of the beds that are here now. The Schedels, when they lived here, weren't so much interested in the annual flowers that we plant nearly 13,000 of every year now. They were more interested in the trees and the shrubs and those sorts of things.
It took 2 years, but in 1991, this 70-year dream of Joe and Marie Schedel opened to the public. But things wouldn't get any easier. Just a year later, the gardens faced perhaps its greatest crisis. On July 12, 1992, a tornado ripped through Elmore, badly damaging the gardens. But if there were ever a man for a crisis, Dr. Fisher would qualify.
The first thing he did was, he says, we're going to continue to be open, and he said we're going to still have people come out. And I remember he started working right away. I remember there was stuff in the Japanese garden, and he went right down to his underwear, jumped in, and was getting stuff out of the Japanese garden. I thought, there's a guy that's really getting in there.
The tornado had a lasting impact.
Yet today, you can walk around and see the scars. There were 131 mature trees that were taken out by that tornado. Some of them we didn't even find. It carried them away and they were never found.
But that impact paled in comparison to the positive one Dr. Fisher had throughout his leadership. Much of your experience today is thanks to his vision. Most of the prominent plant beds were planned and developed by him. Many unusual species of trees and shrubs were added.
Dr. Fisher touched the place with his hand in that way by creating a lot of the beauty that we see here today.
The Schedels had a vision. Dr. Richard Fisher made it a reality. Dr. Fisher retired in 1998 and passed away just 2 years later, but he could claim an extraordinary legacy, and he would still loom large as the next director took the reins.
As we made changes, we were always tried to be careful to honor the concepts and the ideas and the wishes of Dr. Fisher, the former director.
Dr. Reg Noble would build on that groundwork while building a legacy very much his own. He, too, was a retired BGSU biology professor and internationally renowned plant physiologist, but he immediately saw something more eminently practical than the plants alone.
I've been in leadership roles most of my adult life, and I've never been in a position where we had enough money. And that was, of course, I suppose our biggest challenge here.
It was clear that this extraordinary place would never be all it could be through the endowment alone. Dr. Noble and his wife Sherry attracted grants, developed the donor base, and most importantly, cultivated relationships. Memberships grew from just a handful to nearly 500.
He really put in place the structure that we have now, whereby we were able to raise the funds to keep this place going.
And the best way to develop relationships with the community is to give the community a true role in the operation.
When he took over, our volunteer staff was just a few people. Now we have more than 80 volunteers that come in and help us out in almost every aspect of the operations of this place.
Dr. Noble made his mark on the gardens themselves, placing sculpture in the midst of nature's canvas.
We began to focus on cultural kinds of activities and displays, and that resulted in the sculpture exhibits and the sculpture that we have around the gardens now.
He also brought an incredible attention to detail. He took the already beautiful gardens and made them nothing less than stunning. But his last major contribution wasn't grown, it was built. The Brown Welcome Center, a nearly $1 million facility that opened in 2008. And the very first function held there was Reg and Sherry's 50th wedding anniversary celebration.
We've had great directors. I think they've used good common sense financially and so forth. And I think because of that, this place is still able to go on. Had it not had good leadership, I don't think it would be here.
But the Schedel Arboretum and Gardens is here, a gift for all of us, because Dr. Richard Fisher and Dr. Reg Noble so completely grasped the vision of Joe and Marie Schedel: nature, culture, peace, serenity. We thank them for their special understanding and tireless efforts to develop and care for this living legacy of the Schedels.
As I walk by the pagoda where their ashes are entombed, I wonder what the Schedels would think if they could come back here. I hope they would be pleased, and I think they would.